Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Welcome to Tales from the Fandom podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. Today's guest is based in Colorado. He was mentioned in our first podcast with Jaquel Overstreet as one of our favorite authors. He is the writer of the Iron Druid Chronicles. I'm joined today by Kevin Hearne. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, Kevin.
Oh, my pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so happy that we were able to get you on this podcast. I was turned on to your books about a year, maybe 2 years ago from one of my best friends, and I haven't looked back since.
Oh, well, thanks. And please give your friend a high five for me.
Oh, I will. I'll definitely be giving her more than one high five on that account.
Good.
So, before we get into your popularity and the books that you've written and the universes you've delved in, when you were a kid, what were you into as like fandoms go?
Oh, I was into Spider-Man back when there was just like, two Spider-Man titles,
Right.
Yeah, now there's so many you can't keep up, and there's they keep rebooting it and so on. But yeah, I was into Spider-Man and kind of basically the Marvel comics, X-Men, the New Mutants, stuff like that. That was what I was into. And then some of those old 1970s shows, I suppose. But yeah, and then in the 80s, I got more into some of the other comics, and very late, The Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Love that stuff. Mm-hmm. Some of the more Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, some of the spookier, kind of more mature written comics.
Right.
That aren't necessarily intended for little kids, and they're just fantastically written comics. So we kind of got into those a little bit later on.
Okay, what are you into now? Now you've gone from the Spider-Man comics, the Marvel Universe, and then the more adultish comics with the mature storylines. Is there stuff that you're drawn to now?
Yeah, Ms. Marvel. I love Ms. Marvel. Written by G. Willow Wilson. It's so sweet and well done, and dealing with an actual teenager. For example, I think they're dealing with her being in high school and being a teenager much better than they used to do with Peter Parker being one in high school. I think this is a lot more accurate. And I say that as a high school teacher, a former high school teacher. I just think that they're handling it really well. I love Kim and Kim. It's a brand new series that just came out with one issue. I really enjoyed it, and I'll be following that. I'm also into Chew, which is an Image comic, well, I was into Rat Queens for a while, but that seems to have gone on hiatus, so I'm not sure if it's coming back or not, but that was a lot of fun to read for a while. So that's pretty much what I'm into in The Expanse on Sci-Fi. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I've been watching The Expanse on Sci-Fi because it's an adaptation of the sci-fi series that I love. By James S.A. Corey. There's 5 books in it right now, but they're going to write 9. And they just stopped shooting their second season, which I think is going to come back on in January. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's awesome. And I know for people that have listened to this podcast, Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, is one of the most recognized and respected comics that's currently being published, and people just love the character and love what they've been doing with the character so far.
Yeah, she's fantastic. It's nice to have somebody sort of be genuinely good and want to help. I really like what she's doing. And the Civil War stuff, is it Civil War 2 that's starting right now?
Yes, it's actually about to wrap up, I believe.
Okay, I might be a month or two behind. I'm not sure. But yeah, it looks like Kamala kind of got wrapped up in some stuff, and she's having some doubts about it. So, but a good look at how people you admire can sometimes be wrong, and you don't want them to be, so you go along. And then you have to realize at some point maybe I should not be just following. I should be leading. I think that's
Exactly.
really good with what they're doing with that too. So
Definitely. What fandoms have influenced your writing? Because not only have you written the Iron Druid Chronicles, but you've played in the sandbox that is Star Wars.
oh yeah.
Was there something that influenced your writing? Are there writers that have influenced you? Just
Yeah, obviously Star Wars is a big influence on anybody, of my generation, and well, almost all generations at this point. They've done a very good job at, making it new for new, the next generation. And then Lord of the Rings and Star Trek, The Princess Bride, a lot of the stuff that actually winds up getting cameos in my series. The little shout outs. Battlestar Galactica, the new one, even the old one, I used to watch that as a kid too, back in the 70s. So Cylons, man, they were always that was sort of the original fear of technology thing, the precursor to Terminator, back in the day. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been into, what's influenced me. I don't really write a ton of science fiction and space stuff, but I wind up loving the dramas.
how did you come up with the idea for the Iron Druid Chronicles? You currently have 8 books out now, with a ninth on the way, plus the novellas and the side book, or I hate to call it the side book, but the Purloined Poodle, which is coming out.
Yeah, it's a novella. And then I also have a book of short stories coming out next year called Besieged, and I'm working on that right now, getting that finished up. Anyway, how did I get started with it? I was really writing to entertain myself. I never really thought it would go anywhere. In fact, I wasn't even going to send it out to any agents. My wife told me, "You will," so she made me do it. But I had honestly written it to entertain myself. I just wanted to kind of tell a story. The whole time I was writing it, I'm like, nobody's going to want this. Who's going to want to read about a talking dog? This is too silly. And it wound up being something that a lot of folks liked, and much to my surprise. But I got started on it for just many different reasons. I wanted to have a dog character just because I like dogs, and then yeah, I needed to find a uh, magical practitioner that would work well with a dog, but I didn't like the idea of a wizard or a witch just because they usually have a master servant relationship, like a familiar. That didn't strike the right tone for me at all. So I went with a druid. And then once I started researching druids and some of the mythology and things like that, it became really fascinating to me and kind of built from there. And then I was also fascinated with the idea of what if we did live a long time? What would that do to us? So there's explorations of how you hold on to your humanity or you lose it the longer you live. And Atticus really holds on to his humanity through Oberon and trying to live in the present rather than dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. And that is kind of the impetus for him. And also at the time, my father was in ill health; he was declining, and so I was ruminating quite a bit on, um, you know, basically we should, say that we love somebody while we got a chance to do so. And that's where that passage in book 3 comes from when he says goodbye to the widow McDonough. So that whole thing, or that theme about living long and what it does to us, kind of grew out of what I was experiencing myself. And then, of course, I mashed up a whole bunch of different pop culture things. Again, it was all to entertain myself, and I wasn't really thinking so much of taking it to market. That came afterward. So there you go.
Okay. I know for me, when my friend was trying to get me into the Iron Druid Chronicle, she kept saying, it's Iron Druid, Iron Druid, Iron Druid. And as a person that played Dungeons and Dragons growing up, you have this idea of what a druid is or isn't based on what the role playing game has put out. And when I got to actually start reading the first book, Hounded, I was blown away by how completely radically different Atticus is as a druid from what is that general perception, at least in the role-playing world, as to what a druid does and does not do.
Yeah, that I never played those role playing games. That might have had something to do with it.
Definitely. I mean, uh, normally, like with the role playing games, they're not allowed to use any metal of any sort. They do get a familiar, like an animal companion, and they're super big into like magical spells, defender of nature, which I mean Atticus is. And he takes that role very seriously, but on the other hand, he's completely different from the stereotypical D&D druid.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want that at all either. I did see the way druids were portrayed in a game called EverQuest,
Hmm.
um, and I was, definitely trying to shy away from that perception. And then perhaps the EverQuest one was built um, a little bit in tune with the role playing games you're talking about.
Probably so.
Yeah.
What's been your favorite book that you've published as far as the Iron Druid Chronicles? Do you have a favorite, or is it like choosing children? Like you can't really choose which one that you love the best.
I really have liked the past two, where I've finally got to address three main characters instead of just one. It took a while to get to the point where Granuel and Owen were their own narrators. Now
Hmm.
that they are there, I'm enjoying the challenges of writing different voices, and I'm also very amused by them as well. So I think they each have their own important stories to tell, and they also make the tale a bit richer, more nuanced, because now they each have their own opinions of Atticus, and it gives you a different look at him than you had in the first 6 books. So that's I've really been enjoying that element of it, to the additional narrators.
How do you get into their headspace when you're writing? Do you set aside time where you're saying, I'm going to write just Atticus for maybe like an hour and then switch over to Owen, or is it something where you just write and whatever happens happens?
Yeah, I try to stay in the same character's head for a few days at a time. Um, I have to. I have an outline for the book, and so what I'll try to do is write several Atticus chapters and then several Granuel chapters and things like that, and then make sure that they're all kind of progressing together well. But I do switch as I'm writing. It's just, I try to spend a few days to a week at a time in each character's head, so that I'm not constantly shifting. Even when I do that, though, I do find some of the words creep into the other voice, and I have to go back and ruthlessly edit those out. Um, for example, some of the British or Irish slang will creep into Granuel's um, chapters, and then I realize, well, look, an American kid would never say any of this,
Hmm.
so I have to get rid of that stuff. So it's just little things like that, phrasing and stuff, so on and so forth, that might bleed in from one character to another, and there would be a lot more of that bleed if I didn't spend so much time in one character's head. Um, if I was switching from one character to another in the same day, it would be just a big old mess. So
Okay. Now, one of my favorite scenes, and it's a scene that my friend had prepared me for, was in the book when they all Atticus and Leaf and the other characters are on their way to Asgard, and each of them gets to tell their story of why they are going on this mission or this quest to Asgard. And my friend had said, and I believe I told you the story when I met you in Orlando, is that she said, you're gonna, because the buildup had been, oh, Leaf is this really cool character. We really love Leaf. He's so awesome. And she's like, you need to really wait until you finish that book. And afterwards, I think the message that I had sent to her was Leaf sucks. And we end our, like, whenever we send emails or we talk, we always end our conversations with Leaf sucks, because the revelation of what happens and everything that's tied to Leaf, um, it's really it kind of just blows you away. It's shocking. It's this huge turn which almost turns like your entire story going from one direction to a totally different direction, and just really begins this spiral of I almost say suckitude for Atticus.
Yeah, that the bad decision well, I should say bad decisions that Atticus makes in Hammered will definitely stick around to haunt him for the rest of the series. And that's something that often happens to us. We can often be haunted by something we did when we were in a moment of stupidity and regret it very much, but still have to deal with the consequences for a long time afterward.
I know that a lot of authors, when I read their interviews about when it comes to killing characters, sometimes they have no issue with it. George R.R. Martin seems to revel in it. J.K. Rowling gets emotional about it. Has there been a character that you've killed off that's affected you, or that was more of a surprise when people read it and responded to you, like over social media, like, I can't believe you killed this character?
Oh well, yeah. I almost don't want to mention them aloud just in case there's spoilers for somebody. But um, yeah, there's been some characters where I'm crying as I'm writing the end, and then there have been others where I didn't think it was that big a deal, and then I got all these emails like, "Oh my gosh, why'd you do that?" So surprising, it's good that that happens though, that people feel something for those characters. That means I'm doing my job well. But I would say there's only been one that, well, two that have really surprised me about the reaction that I've gotten. But the others I sort of expected there to be a reaction because I felt the kind of the same way um, about it. But yeah, you don't go into all this chaos and expect to have no casualties. Somebody's got to pay the price, and
Hmm.
that's I'm not as kill happy perhaps as some other authors, but I know that I do my fair share.
When you're writing, and I was going through some of your books to just pull out different fandoms that you had mentioned, either offhand or through different characters, uh, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Star Trek, Princess Bride, Neil Gaiman, a great Game of Thrones reference with Granuel and the Yetis. Granuel is a fangirl of Nathan Fillion. Atticus loves Shakespeare. Is that all something where, when you're writing these characters, you're trying to figure out what they may have been into or have been watching? I know with Atticus, he has like a select variety of tastes that range different spectrums. Or are you just picking out things uh, that you like, and you insert that into the characters?
Yeah, it's pretty much that second one. These are all things that I've enjoyed, and so I'll have them. My characters share their enjoyment with it too, because there's lots of overlapping fandoms, obviously. So yeah, that's one of the fascinating things about urban fantasies. I do think it's basically a mashup of all kinds of stuff. That's one of the primary attractions of the genre, is that you take something in this modern world and then you add elements of the fantastical. So it's a mashup to begin with, and the more you mash up, the more the fun it can be, and you can actually squeeze some meaning out of it because um, we are, after all, getting some deeper thematic issues being explored in some of our favorite pop culture things, and it can be a shorthand sometimes. Using those references can be a shorthand to draw attention to those themes.
Do you feel sometimes that it's overused? Maybe not in your work, but do you feel that there's things that rely too heavily on pop culture, and then when you get to maybe read it 5 or 10 years in the future, that it's leaned too heavily on it and the meaning is lost?
Oh, perhaps so. Sure. Yeah. I. It's not something I think too deeply about. Um, I. I'm not sure that even something Hounded at this point might have some references that are out of date at this point.
Hmm.
I and that's fine. It was always supposed to be something that was to be appreciated in the now. Because again, I was writing to entertain myself, right?
Okay.
at the time, and that's still what I do. And I'm not sitting here thinking about how it would be looked at in the future. They're meant to be consumed now. So, yeah, I really don't worry about it too much.
Besides Atticus, Owen, Granuaile, do you have a favorite side character or god or goddess that you've been able to write in your Iron Druid Chronicles?
I've really been enjoying Perun and Flittish. Um, they're as a couple, I think they're kind of funny. And then, pardon me, in the story that's coming out in Besieged next summer, I wrote a short story featuring the two of them together, uh, and it's Perun as the narrator. So that will be coming out, and I'm excited for folks to read it. The folks who have read it so far have been excited about what happens there, and it's a development that will affect the series. So yeah,
Okay.
they're side characters that have always been around, that I'm finally able to kind of develop a little bit on their own. That's what some of these short stories and novellas are able to do. I really like that aspect of just having that shorter form available so that you can explore some of these characters. And then I've also really enjoyed bringing Greta a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more to the forefront. We still haven't gotten incredibly deep with her or anything, but she appeared in every single book. She would have at least one small appearance in books 1 through 6, and then she finally started to have a larger role in book 7. And that was something that I'd been waiting and waiting for a long time. And I like that idea that some of these characters that seem to be just sort of there as background actually have their own very vibrant lives and so on. They're just not the focus of the story when you're writing it. So when we get to a point where we can focus on them, that's really gratifying.
Absolutely, and it's always something where people I imagine that they overlook it and they're like, okay, this character shows up and then disappears, not thinking that they have their own things going on, their own activities, their own trials and tribulations. And it is nice to see when those side characters are brought up and raised up and you get to learn more about them.
Yeah, they've had a rich life all this time. It's just that that's not where the focus of the narrative was at the time. So yeah, it's good to finally get into that.
Is there a pantheon that you wish you had been able to play with more or include more in the series that you might have not when you initially started out you had the tie-ins with like the Norse mythology and then the Greek and Roman mythology, the Irish mythology. Um, is there a pantheon of gods or goddesses or characters that you wish you had included earlier that you're maybe just coming to learn about?
I'm learning a little bit about the Orishas from the Yoruba nation in Africa, and the Yoruba, culture spans what are now 3 different countries in Africa, but these countries, the borders of these countries were basically set by, colonial white invaders, and they
Hmm.
don't make a lot of sense for the people living there. And so you constantly have a lot of these border fights and skirmishes of one kind or another going on there because the people would rather be aligned, the way they had always been according to tribal tradition, not what some invader decided would be the border. So I'm trying to learn a little bit more about them. It's really fascinating and cool. And I have just one of those Orishas in the series, and his name is Shengo. And he appeared in book 4, and he has appeared again in book 8, and he will appear in book 9. So um, I wish I had a little bit more about them, and of course about some other traditions from the various cultures in Africa. But I haven't, our Western education system, unfortunately, doesn't make that readily available to us. It's tough to find reliable information about it, and um, without me traveling there, which I might not be able to do in time. So,
Right.
yeah, I've just I've got the one. I wish there were more, and I'm hoping I'm doing it correctly to the spirit of the way they see him. I always try to be careful about that, and present those deities in correctly, the way that a lot of their followers would appreciate. Um, Perhaps with the exception of Thor. Uh, but I do have a reason for why I depicted Thor the way I did. He was the only thunder god in all of the world's religions that knew how he was going to die. So he was an avatar of unstable, violent weather. Unstable to begin with, and he often has a quick temper to reflect that. But he knew that he wouldn't ever receive consequences for his actions until he met Jormungandr, the world serpent, at the end of time. So I thought that over time it would tend to make him think that, well, I can do whatever I want because I can't die until I meet a big snake. So there are no consequences for my behavior. So that's the reason I had him kind of go corrupt. It was kind of built into the structure of that particular faith. Um, anyway, rambling on you there. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
When you were writing your first books of the Iron Druid Chronicles, or even before that, you were a full-time teacher, correct?
Yes.
How did you handle the balance of being a full-time teacher with papers to grade and assignments to dole out while writing your books?
Well, it was really something that I was doing, to please myself, to relax. It was my hobby, whatever you want to call it. It was my release of various frustrations. Um, Kids don't like Shakespeare. Well, I'm going to put Shakespeare in my book, because I really like him.
Mm-hmm.
It was I was writing instead of watching TV. I would write for a couple hours after dinner each night, and then I would get to work after that. It was my way of de-stressing a little bit, and then I would go ahead and grade papers or plan the next day's lessons, or both. So it was just that kind of a thing. I would be writing during my time off from school as well, during summer break and so on and so forth. And it was always, my escape, basically.
Okay. How is it being on the other side of fandom, from being a fan of somebody's work to being a person who has fans?
Oh, the cool thing about being a writer is it's sort of the perfect level of celebrity. I don't get paparazzi following me around because nobody wants to look at a writer, and I don't get a lot of the intrusive kind of stuff at all. I don't get recognized in the grocery store, etc. So I just have a normal life. Um, Day to day. And then whenever I'm supposed to be Kevin Hearne, the writer, I'm at an event like a convention or something. And then I'm, minor celebrity for those few days, and then, it's over with. So that's kind of cool. Actually, I think there's probably a lot of more famous celebrities who wish they could, have that kind of a deal where they didn't have to be famous most of the time. So it's been fantastic. Folks are of course very nice, and I love meeting readers. They're fantastic folks.
What is the interaction with your fans like, whether it's at a convention or a book signing or just even an appearance at a bar or a taco shop?
Oh, it's the same thing where that I would be like if I met a writer that I'm an admirer of. They just want to thank me for the story, and I totally am down with that because that's what I want to do when I meet writers. So yeah, it's fantastic. I'm always happy to, people who read are generally pretty smart, cool folks. So um, yeah, it's always a pleasure to meet them.
One of my favorite things about you is you respond on your Facebook page, to a lot of different people, not only on the Facebook page, but on your Twitter, on the new IMSI website that just started up about a year ago, but a lot of people just caught on to it more recently.
Yeah, I love it.
Is that you're super responsive, whether people are asking questions or just talking to people. I mean, is really great.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, yeah, I like folks. I mean, was teaching high school because I like kids, and I'm kind of a social person, but writing is very solitary. So the lovely online communities of one stripe or another are able to allow us to connect a little bit. So I enjoy that. And I really do like IMSI. If you guys are not on there yet, if you just go to imsy.com/Kevin Hearne and request to be included, I'll get you in there. It's so nice because they're trying to create an environment that's positive and troll free. They're doing that, with various ways. But um, I mean, they just recently closed the account of some of those GamerGator guys, and
Yep.
deleted their accounts entirely. And they're not tolerating that kind of hate speech stuff. So I like that, and I mean, especially when there are so many of my friends who experience some sort of harassment online. I keep wishing that that Twitter would do something about it, and they don't. So
Mm-hmm.
IMSI seems to be responsive, and they're trying to be the kind of the social site a lot of us have been waiting for. So I'm hopeful that it will continue to take off and everybody will get over there because it doesn't have ads either. It's for me, it's like better than Facebook and Twitter. It's fantastic.
It is the website itself is pretty cool because everyone kind of gets added to the introductions group where every day you see new people introducing themselves and people just commenting back, and it feels very almost like this new family that's coming together on this site to develop and add and just remake the internet to almost what it felt like when I was getting on it as a kid, where everything was really laid back and not there's like no flame wars or Twitter hate or stuff like that. It feels much like a throwback.
Oh yeah, and they're consciously trying to build in structures to rein in the sort of trolling that happens, for example, on Reddit or Twitter. And
Hmm.
I'm hopeful that this will be kind of the future, and that more folks will get over there. I think they're going to be going live, to the general public. They're still in beta, but I think by next month they're supposed to be open to the general public. So like I said, if anybody wants to get in there now, go for it. I just have me, mz.com/Kevin Hearne and request, an invitation from me, and I'll approve you and get you in now. And so you don't have to wait for the public thing. But it's really cool to explore the different communities that are going on there, um, and and just enjoy the positive sense of community, and rather than, oh my gosh, there's a fire over here,
Right.
So.
One of the coolest things that I saw on your Twitter and Facebook account recently was the Pocket Morrigan that you received at DragonCon.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
I love seeing its adventures all around with everything, and then the comments that you do on top of that just make it every time she shows up. It's real fun to see what she's doing.
Yeah, I'll have to do one today. I haven't done that in a few days, and so I'll have to get back on that. Just it's fun to do those, they're just be silly. That is part of the fun of the internet sometimes.
So after Iron Druid wraps up, you are working on a new trilogy. I believe it's called the Seven Cannings trilogy. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah, the seven kennings. Yeah,
Okay.
kenning being an old English word, uh, meaning that you know something very, very well.
Okay. And the first book is called Plague of Giants.
Yes, A Plague of Giants is the first book, and that'll be out next September. And I'm very excited for folks to check it out. It is a completely different world and magic system from the Iron Druid, but I've been working on it a long, long time, and I've tried some new things structurally, and I hope people give it a shot and hope they like it.
Is it going to be it's not urban fantasy. Is it more like a traditional fantasy or
Uh-huh.
a take on fantasy?
Yeah, it's more of a traditional second world, fantasy. I drew my own map, and have krakens in the sea, which is a lot of fun. Good times. It is a very I've thought a lot about languages and of course and all of that kind of stuff, but I've also tried to avoid some of the more traditional sorts of structures. There's no real quest going on. There's instead what we're dealing with is an invasion of giants in a formerly peaceful country, and how are these people not only going to survive, one, but then what will their societies look like after, if they do survive, because it can't just go back to the way it was. Once you have something that's completely so disruptive, you have to change. And the way when you have an opportunity to make a big change, then people can even get upset about what form that change ought to be. And so there's a lot of different conflicts going on, and all catalyzed by this invasion. But there are other conflicts besides just the outside conflict.
Okay. Now, as I said, you got to play in the Star Wars sandbox, as it is. Were you approached to do that? Did you approach them? How did that work with Lucas or the publisher reaching out for authors?
Yeah, that's pretty much how they operate. They see your work elsewhere. They call you. You don't call them, kind of thing.
Okay.
They as far as I know, anyway, they do not accept any kind of submissions. They seek out authors that they want to work with. So they had liked my Iron Druid stuff. They liked Atticus and what I was doing with him, and they thought I would be a good fit to write Luke Skywalker. So that's why they approached me specifically for Heir to the Jedi and to tell a Luke Skywalker story.
How was the experience getting to do a Star Wars book as opposed to Iron Druid? Was it more constrained where they give you Luke can do X, Y, and Z, but you can't have him do a whole subset of other things? Or was it more you wrote the book and then they came back and said that you needed to make changes?
Oh, kind of both of that, really. It was a standalone Luke Skywalker story in between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. So you're constrained, of course, by the movies, right? So you have to fit your story and his abilities in between that time. But that's what fascinated me about the opportunity, is because this was a time when Ben Kenobi is dead and he hasn't yet met Yoda. So how does he grow in the Force during that time when there's really nobody to train him? And so that was the challenge, and that was the fun for me, because I'd always wondered as a kid, when Empire Strikes Back starts out and he's able to summon that lightsaber to his hand in the Wampa Cave.
Right.
How did he learn how to do that when Ben Kenobi wasn't around to teach him, and he hasn't met Yoda yet? I mean, he obviously grew quite a bit in those years, but how? So that's what I got to tackle, and it was a lot of fun.
Now, was this one of the last books that came out before the Disney acquisition, where they changed the canon or the expanded universe and set it into the Legends area?
Mine's canon.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah. It just it was one of the, I don't know if it was the second or I think it's the third canon book. First one being The New Dawn. Second one is Tarkin, and then Heir to the Jedi is the third canon book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Another question that I had, which is related to your writing, but it involves music, is do you listen to music when you're writing?
Yes.
Is there a particular style of music that you listen to?
It's usually metal. I'll sometimes listen to folk or classical. It just depends. Almost anything except country. And then I write often to instrumental metal. Yngwie Malmsteen writes some very cool kind of a blend between heavy metal and classical music. And then I'll listen to Scale the Summit. They do entirely instrumental metal. They've got like 4 or 5 albums out, and I like to listen to them. So That's basically what I'm doing, is mostly stuff without lyrics, just because the lyrics can kind of interfere with the words I'm trying to generate. So,
Okay.
but yeah, I'll switch between things, and sometimes make playlists and so on and so forth.
Okay. The obligatory author question is, what advice would you give to people who would want to get their work published?
Just don't give up. That's what I did. I wrote for 19 years before I got published. It's not something that necessarily happens overnight. I was, of course, writing just a little bit at a time every night for a very long time, but I didn't give up. I kept telling stories. And Hounded was my first sale, but it was like my third completed book. And it was my other books took a long, long time to finish, because I was really kind of flailing about, not knowing what I was doing. I never attended any writing conferences or anything like that. That might have helped if I had. But I was just kind of doing everything on my own, again, to entertain myself, as a kind of a de-stressor sort of situation for myself. So when I finally got done with Hounded, and then that wound up selling, I was super surprised and super happy, obviously. Um, but I guess you just gotta keep at it until you kind of fall into your own. You get finishing your first book is huge. That is the big thing. Finish that first book, even if it's terrible, and most likely, I mean, not to depress you, it probably will be terrible, and that's okay though. You have to write some bad books so that you learn how to write good ones. I could not have written Hounded. Pardon me. I could not have written Hounded if I had not written my first couple of bad books first. They were essential to the learning process. So that was 9 years of work that never got published and never will get published, but it prepared me to write Hounded. So, and then when I wrote Hounded and it went out, to publishers, I had 4 different publishers bid on it at auction. So I had obviously learned something there, worth publishing. So, but I couldn't have gotten there without screwing up first. So just keep at it.
I was going to ask, is it harder to start or is it harder to finish?
Oh, it's harder to finish. People start books all the time. It's finishing them. It's hard. Um, you know, and then I often hear excuse from folks saying, "Oh, if I only had the time, I would write a novel." I was like, "Well, you got to make time. If you want to do it, you will find the time. Write a little bit every day." I was writing 250 to 500 words a day, and that's about it. But that is enough, if you're consistent with it, to get a novel done in a year or two.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you just gotta keep plugging away at it. Finishing is always the hardest part, and once you do finish that first book, it gives you such confidence to start the next one, because now you can finish a novel, and that gives you a lot of confidence going forward, and the faith in yourself to make changes, and to try some new things as well. So I think that stop leaning on cliches and so on and so forth. Um, so yeah, just be consistent with your output and finish your work.
Okay. What's next for you? I mean, Purloined Poodle's coming out as we record this. I believe it comes out the 25th.
The 30th. Yeah.
30th.
Yeah.
Okay, 30th. After Purloined Poodle, what's your release schedule as far as your next books go?
I'll have Besieged out next July, and that's going to be, again, a collection of Iron Druid short stories that are all new. Um, there will be some Atticus stories and Granuel story, a couple of Owen stories, and also that Perun story I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that will be A Plague of Giants in September. And then after that, we should see Scourged, which is the final Iron Druid book. But that'll be coming out in 2018. I haven't started writing that one yet.
Okay. For people that are listening to the podcast and want to find you on the various websites, I know we mentioned IMZ.
Mm-hmm.
Where else can people find you?
I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/author Kevin. And then I'm on Twitter at Kevin Hearne. I'm on Instagram as well, as Kevin_Hearne. And then I have my website, kevinhearne.com.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much again for taking the time out of your schedule to make time to record with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me again. It's been lovely.
And hopefully you'll make it back to Orlando next time you get to do a book tour, because I'd love to be able to at least hear your stories again.
Well, thanks very much. Yeah, it was a lovely time being out there. That was one heck of a crowd at the Barnes & Noble there.
Absolutely. It's a lot more than I expected when I went with my wife. I was like, there's really a lot of people here. And then there just more people kept coming.
Yeah, that was really sweet. So thank you, Florida. I appreciate you coming to see me.
Well, thank you so much again. I really appreciate this so much, Mr. Hearne.
Oh, you bet. Take care of yourself. We'll talk later.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.